Hi, I'm Phil Roundtree and welcome to the HowAudio.com podcast. In this HowAudio.com podcast, we'll be checking in with Platinum Award-winning engineer Jeff Dykhouse. Jeff will be showing us some really cool tips from his GarageBand 3 title. So let's take it away, Jeff.
In this segment, we're going to take a look at the podcast track. The podcast track is different than a real instrument or a software instrument track like we looked at before. It contains the graphics and text necessary to turn a regular MP3 file into a podcast. Let's take a look. When you make a new project in GarageBand, you're hit with this window that lets us choose what kind of project we want to make. In this case, let's click New Podcast Episode. We'll name it Podcast 1. And you can see the window looks quite a bit different than a music project. It really doesn't. If we close the media browser and we close the editor, click on voice, it's very much like a regular window. And let's go ahead and do that. Let's record a voice here before we get into podcast, just to give us a guide to make our podcast happen. And I need to select channel 1, and I'm okay with the preset here of male radio sound. And I don't want to hear myself, so I'm going to leave monitor off. Okay, and let's record. Welcome to the Bad Dog Radio Show. On this episode, we'll be interviewing a bad hamster. So, this is our Bad Dog Radio Show. Let's go ahead now and switch to the podcast track and open up the media browser, open up the editor so we can edit the podcast track. And we're going to add a few things. We're going to add our radio show graphic to the episode artwork. And let's listen. Welcome to the Bad Dog Radio Show. On this episode, we'll be interviewing a bad hamster. So where the bad hamster comes in, we want to show a picture of the bad hamster. The way to do that is we'll make a marker. We'll drag the bad hamster artwork to that marker. We can close this browser here. We'll call it Bad Hamster Interview. And we can even have a URL. So we could type in a URL to click here. We could type in a URL that people can go to when they click. So we could do http www.badhamster.com. I don't know if there really is badhamster.com, so don't click on that. Now, when people watch the episode, they'll see on their video iPod or on their computer when they watch it, the graphics as well. We can watch it by clicking on the info track for the podcast, the info window for the podcast track. It gives us the podcast preview. And let's go ahead and say, this is the Bad Dog Radio Show, episode 1. And parental advisory, it's clean as of this point. And the artist is JD, and the title is BD Radio Show 1. Or you actually should name it something better than that, but for now, that's what we'll do. And then let's watch it. Welcome to the Bad Dog Radio Show. On this episode, we'll be interviewing a bad hamster. Click here. Badhamster.com. Fortunately for all, there is no badhamster.com. Anyway, you get the idea. That's how that works. And you can drag sound effects and jingles and all those things to make your show. And we'll get into that on the chapters on making up your own podcast.
Thanks, Jeff. Well, that about wraps it up for this edition of the HowAudio.com podcast. Be sure to check us out on the web for all your music, audio, and software training needs. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.